Okay, what do you say we try to help a couple folks out? I'm going to do my best here, and I'm going to have you as my backup for sure because I've got a couple stumpers here. And basically, we've got people calling in, hey, MacCast, I need your help. They're using the new MacCast Bat Signal Apple shortcut, iOS shortcut that we have. If you missed that, it was covered on the last episode of the MacCast, but you can find it in the show notes for that episode. Over at maccast.com. So you'll find the link for that if you need it. You can also just email me. I'll happily send the link on to you if you didn't get that or if you missed that episode. But we have Rick who emailed in and he says he wants to know if it's possible to make a file invisible on Mac OS. And the reason for this is that he uses an encrypted disk image, or a series, it sounds like, of encrypted disk images to store his tax information, and he wants to also be able to hide those on his system. And I just want to do a little aside because I guess this is going to be a 2-for-1 tip. I covered this a long time ago on the MacCast, but I think encrypted disk images are a excellent way to store sensitive data like tax records on your Mac. And they're great because you can create them and set them up locally. You encrypt them locally, so they're already encrypted on your device. And then when you have backups via Time Machine on a local drive, cloned backups, NAS backups, or even when those encrypted disk images get backed up to the cloud, they're secured, they're backed up, encrypted. So it's a great way to protect that data, even when it's kind of out of your hands, or if your hard drive were to get stolen, something like that. So I actually use this technique as well. I have an encrypted disk image that I store all of my sensitive documents on, as a matter of fact, for my paperless library. So where I scan in all my bills and records and stuff like that, that's all on an encrypted disk image as well. Keeps it nice and secure. And they're super easy to create. You just need Disk Utility, which is built right into your Mac. So if you go into Applications Utilities and launch the Disk Utility application, you can create one by going under the File menu, choosing New Image, and then selecting Blank Image. Now, if you're on a modern Mac with the most current operating system, I recommend choosing Apple File System, so APFS, doing a single partition GUID partition map, and then selecting the sparse bundle option. And what's great about the sparse bundle option is for the size, you can pick the largest amount of storage you think you're ever going to need for that disk image, depending upon what you might store in there. So, pick an appropriate disk size. And then what's great about a sparse bundle in that image format is that regardless of the size you choose when setting it up, it's only going to use storage equal to the amount of data that you've put into that disk image. So even though you might say, hey, I want a 500 gigabyte disk image, if you only put 10 gigabytes in there, it's only going to use up 10 gigabytes of storage. Now, the important thing to know about creating disk images, though, is when you set them up with the sparse bundle, you need to define the maximum size. So it'll never grow over 500 megabytes. You'll basically run out of storage at that point. So you kind of have to think about it like almost like a virtual external hard drive, even though it's actually a file that sits there on your Mac. So just be aware of that when you set up the limit. And then for the encryption, you just need to select the encryption option. I'd like to choose 256-bit AES encryption because that's the strongest. You could go with 128. Both are strong and secure, but obviously 256 is going to be better. And it will prompt you at that point to enter an encryption password. Now, make sure you make this password secure. And very, very important, do not forget this password, because if you do, you're not going to be able to get to your documents and files. You're not going to be able to decrypt that encrypted disk image. That's the whole point of making one, right? So I recommend using a password manager like 1Password or LastPass to store that password. And also, it will ask you if you use iCloud Keychain if you want to store that in there as well. I like to store it in there because it's convenient. It means when you're logged into your Mac, you can mount that disk image without needing to re-enter your password or enter that encryption password. It's just stored securely in your iCloud Keychain. If you are going to use that option, though, make sure you're using a unique secure password on your Mac, because if you're logged into your Mac, you would have access to that. So if someone can get into your Mac, they could potentially get into your encrypted disk image if you stored the password for that in your iCloud keychain. So just be aware of all that. We're talking about security here. The whole point is to secure our documents. So to actually use the disk image, once you set it up, you mount it like any other external disk on your Mac, and then it'll just show up in your Finder just like any other disk, and you can add or remove files to it. You can also eject the disk, and you can remount it simply by double-clicking on the disk image file that's on your Mac. Now, you should note, again, when that encrypted disk image is mounted and you've unencrypted it, it is in the unencrypted state. That's why you can copy and move files to and from it freely in the Finder. This normally shouldn't be a problem, but generally when you're done using it, you do want to eject it, which puts it back into its encrypted state. And if it is mounted on your desktop, you're going to want to make sure that when your Mac goes to sleep or you shut it down, it goes into a password state, because, again, if someone were to walk up to your machine at that point and you had it mounted, they would have access to those files. So, again, just another thing to be aware of when using these images. So, wanted to point that out. Now on to the original question. Sorry for that side tangent, but I don't know that everybody knows how to create encrypted disk images. So back to Rick's question, how do I hide the encrypted disk image now if I want to not let anyone see that? On the Mac, it's actually fairly easy because Mac OS is Unix based, and in Unix you can hide any file or folder by just giving it a name that starts with a period. So doing that will actually hide it. Now, if you try to do this in the Finder, by default, Mac OS is not going to allow you to do this. It's going to display a warning saying that you're not allowed to do that because that's reserved for system files. Now, you can get around this by enabling the view of invisible files in the Finder, and there's actually a keyboard shortcut for that. So if you type Command-Shift-period on your Mac, that is going to actually show all of the invisible files, including all these files on your Mac that begin with a dot in the file name. Once this is turned on, I'm giving you this tip. So I don't think it was specifically Spider-Man that said this, but it was his uncle, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So once you turn on invisible files in the Finder, be very, very careful, because it's possible to see everything, and many of these files are critical system files, files that are needed by your system to be able to operate. And if you move, delete, or modify any of these files, you could actually damage your system. So use this tip carefully, but once you've enabled invisible files in the Finder, you can create or rename files or folders with a dot or a period at the beginning of the file name, and doing so will make it invisible. As a matter of fact, when you have the invisible file view on in the Finder and do that, Apple will tell you, hey, if you name this file in this way, it's going to be invisible. Are you sure you want to do that? And you have to click OK. Once you've done that, it will create that file, and then just type Command-Shift-period again to turn off viewing invisible files in the Finder, and then any items that you've named like that are going to be no longer visible in Mac OS. And you can always get back in by toggling this back on. So you'll know the little secret, Command-Shift-period, to toggle on and off visible or invisible files, and maybe somebody else won't. So it's not, you already have an encrypted disk image, so chances of somebody actually getting into that file is really, really slim to none unless they somehow get your password. But if you want to take that extra step and hide it from prying eyes, this is how you can do it. So, Rick, I hope that helps you out.